Yes, we will actually try to have a serious school meeting here today, even though I know there's let's see, I've seen Pac-Man, Thing 1 and Thing 2, and I guess the band Kiss is in the house, is that right? So, and Max is still going to give out his $1,000 for the award. Max, do we have a winner yet, besides you? He's working on it, okay? Welcome. Hope yesterday was a day of rest for you all. You needed it. Certainly, we all needed it. A number of you have asked about what's going on with power and the storm and so on. I'll give you the quick update as far as I know. Watertown, as of last night, was 78% without power. We have not heard much from CL&P, the utility company. The word is that help is coming soon, but we can't really plan on that. We are lucky relative to some schools. There are a lot of schools that have sent kids home. We are, I know you're disappointed to hear that. We are tougher than them, and we're going to have classes. Hotchkiss sent their kids home. Typical softies. We will never emulate them. Two thoughts I'd make, though. If you see if you see anyone in the facilities or grounds crew, whether it's Mr. Shepard or Mr. Lentz or any of the men and women who work, they have been working heroically, and you may not know them by name. I always hope you do, and you get to know the people who work here. But if you get a chance to thank someone just for what they're doing, it's been very tough work, at times dangerous work. As you saw, we have limbs down everywhere. So they have been going nonstop trying to make the place safe for us. And if you get a chance to thank them, please do so, because they've been terrific. And I also would add to that, by the way, the faculty, there are 25 of the 34 faculty homes have no power. So you've got faculty members who are coming into class and teaching and prepping for class in front of fireplaces and in front of candles at the kitchen table. So I know there's kind of a quiet tradition at Taft that happens a lot of times where students thank teachers on the way out of class. This is the time to do it because they're working hard, and we may not have power until later in the week. We just don't know. So let's keep a good attitude, be optimistic, have a can-do feeling, and we'll get through this. So what are we doing today? Today is a celebration that we have once a year in which we celebrate the life of the intellect or the scholar on campus. The Cum Laude Society, as Mr. Wilson will mention in a moment, is probably the nation's most prestigious scholarship society, and it has been around for a long time. If you go on the main hall, of course, you see the plaques. That's our way of saying that the scholar is valued at the school, that we want to celebrate high scholarship always. And we have plaques for cum laude that go back to the 1930s. And so today is a day where we celebrate those students. I would make a comment, though, that I think makes this place really special. There is something in this community that's different than a lot of places, in the sense that you all, as students, celebrate and recognize and support each other in a way that's not the case at every school. And I really mean that. And how that happens, I think, is it's a tradition that goes back and it's passed on from student to student over the years. It happens all the time. I remember 2 years ago, I think it was, at commencement, when Jenny Jing's grade point average as the valedictorian of the school was mentioned, the entire class stood up to give her a standing ovation. I think of examples that happen all the time. I was at the concert Oriokos and Hydrox at the reception on Saturday night, and the enthusiasm that you saw for each group, for each other, and for students who wanted to see them. I thought about how earlier in the day we were hoping to play the football game, and there was the JV soccer team out there trying to shovel the field off. There is an ethos here that's different than some places where you celebrate each other, and it's not a zero-sum game, meaning it is not as if one person wins, someone else is losing. I think that we have something special where you all know how hard it is to achieve at Taft. You know what it takes to get it to a high level, and you celebrate each other's achievements in a really, I think, powerful and profound way, and I love that about this school. I had a message from a parent yesterday, an email, and she had been at Beauty and the Beast, which was just an extraordinary show. I hope many of you got to see it. Absolutely spectacular. And yeah, it was, and obviously part of the pleasure is seeing your classmates, right? Seeing someone who has a talent that you never knew they had, or seeing them adopt a role that you think, I cannot believe he's occupying that role. There's nothing like what he's like. So I was so pleased with it, and this is what the parent wrote me. She just was thanking us for helping them during the storm, and she ended saying, I was especially impressed by the strong show of support by students in the audience for students performing in the play. The students around me were riveted to the action. They loudly applauded their support, and they were quick to jump to their feet for a standing ovation. In a national culture where a lot of teenagers are simply too cool for school, I was touched to see such a strong show of support. And I would say that that's not typical. There are a lot of schools where the feeling is if someone is doing great things, then it comes at a cost and I must be losing. And I think what we have is different. And what happens at Taft is you look at someone who's achieving at a high level and you're so proud of them because they're just a classmate of yours. So great work. We celebrate the scholars of the class today. By any measure, they are extraordinary students. I have said over and over again, though, do not forget that the achievement comes because they worked hard. I looked at their transcripts. There are 89 effort grades given out to this group at the last marking period, and 73 of those were A's. So this group had 73 of the total, 89, were A effort grades. I would remind you that working hard and persevering and having grit, a word I've used before, matters hugely. You will recall last year Professor Angela Duckworth came and spoke to Taft and spoke of this. And I'll just give you a couple quotes that come from a recent interview she had, and I think they are relevant. I'm sure the students behind me embodied it and are relevant to you. She was asked, what is grit? And this is a woman who has pioneered the research on perseverance and self-discipline. And she wrote this: the gritty person approaches achievement as a marathon. The gritty person sticks with it where others might get distracted by boredom or failure, adversity, or plateaus. Gritty people don't have to be gritty about everything they do, but the point is that grit is how they pursue their most serious objectives. A gritty person takes things to completion. That's true for all of us. She said in that quote, you will not be equally gritty and persevering on everything, but on the things that matter, if you are going to achieve, you must. The interviewer said, you taught school and studied achievement more than anyone in the nation as a psychologist. Which is more important for success in school? Self-discipline, that is grit, or IQ? That is, all of us seem to think it is my IQ which will determine how far I go in school. And she writes this: when I was teaching, it became obvious to me that IQ did not explain why so many of my students had reading scores far below their grade level. Based on our studies, I'd say that self-discipline is at least as important as IQ for earning good report card grades. That is, you need to have some matter, some intelligence, obviously, but her point is self-discipline is more important. She was asked this. The military approached her, West Point approached her and said, we are trying to figure out why some students do not survive the first summer at West Point. The first summer at West Point is deliberately intended to be extremely difficult. And the military felt we are investing a lot of resources and money, and we are losing a lot of students at the end of the first summer. Why is that happening? They wanted to know because they were wasting resources. So they called her in, and she's done 5 years of study. And this is what she discovered. Here's her answer to them. The military asked you to look at grit. What did you learn? We've shown that at West Point, grit predicts retention at the barracks, that very difficult summer after you've been first recruited before you actually start classes at West Point. Grit predicts who will last through the summer. We have replicated our study over 4 or 5 years. Every summer we get the same findings. Grit not only predicts retention, but it predicts better than any other predictor that West Point has, including SAT scores, class rank in high school, or physical fitness. That is, when they surveyed students, those who tested high in self-discipline would be predicted to do better than others, and it predicted far better than anything else. Her study has changed the way West Point runs its admissions. Finally, she was asked this: what's more important, self-discipline or self-esteem for being a good student? She said, we did a study in which we followed kids for 4 years. We took their self-control ratings from parents and teachers and students themselves. We tracked them every year. We kept their grades. We pitted self-control and self-esteem against each other, and here's what we found. When students increase in self-control, and I think you can think of all the ways that plays out at Taft in terms of study hall, use of free periods, sticking at tasks that are boring. When students increase in self-control, their grades go up later. When students increase in self-esteem, there is no effect on their grades. It's a very powerful conclusion. Simply saying I feel good about myself does not have any effect on your grades. Having self-discipline does. People have been studying self-esteem for a long time, so we have a lot of data. Many American students, particularly in the last few decades, can feel really good about themselves without actually being good at anything or sticking to anything. This is the problem with the, quote, self-esteem at all costs message. And by the way, it's been a national phenomenon in the last 2 decades. I believe self-esteem should be learned. I find that many parents today never want to say anything critical of their children. Everybody has to be a winner. You take your children to a soccer game, they don't keep score anymore. They don't want anybody to lose. It's a good thing for students to lose sometime. They see what it's like to get up again. They realize it's not the end of the world. I think that's what happens at Taft. The fact of the matter is you will be disappointed. You will lose metaphorically at times. We think that's good, and what matters is do you have the self-discipline, the grit, and the control to get back up and succeed. This is a woman who has pioneered the research. It could not be more clear. If you have the willingness to do that which is hard, to get back up after you've struggled, to face challenges, it will pay off more than anything. And I think that's probably what the students behind me and what I think all of you have done in your years here. So I leave you with that message, and I will turn it over to Mr. Wilson. He will announce the National Merit Scholars, and then we will recognize this year's inductees to Cum Laude. John?
The following students received commendation from the National Merit Scholarship Program for their outstanding performance last academic year on the PSAT, Preliminary Standardized Aptitude Test, finishing in the top 5% of test takers. Please rise when I call your name, and everyone else please hold your applause until I finish the list. Chris Browner, Rob Daigle, Sarah Denning, Mimi Nobel, Ben Garfinkel, Tyler Miller, Christina Morgan, Caitlin Morton, Sarah Nyquist, Thomas Rowe, Julian Senna, Kristen Shaker. We also had one National Merit Scholarship semifinalist who finished in the top 1% of PSAT takers. That was Michael Thomas McCarthy. Two students received commendation from the National Achievement Scholarship Program for their outstanding performance last academic year on the PSAT, finishing in the top 3% of Black Americans who requested entry into the program. Please stand, A.J. Fields and Andrew Robertson. These were the ranking scholars for 2010-2011 with the highest unweighted averages in their classes. Please stand and remain standing when I read your name. For the class of 2014, that's last year's lower mids, this year's mids, with a 95 average, Ling Kan Tang. The class of 2013, last year's mids, with a 95 average, Nayeon Carey Shin. And the class of 2012, last year's upper mids, with a 95.5 unweighted average, Kristen Shaker. And now cum laude. Founded in 1908, the Cum Laude Society is the National Scholarship Society in secondary schools, corresponding to Phi Beta Kappa and Sigma Psi in colleges and scientific universities. A maximum of 20% of the senior class may be elected into membership in the Cum Laude Society. This morning, we will induct 16 members in the class of 2012 who merit inclusion in the society based on their academic records for both mid and upper mid years. At this spring's graduation, this first group will be joined by other seniors whose selection will be based on their records for their upper mid and senior years. The 16 students inducted this morning represent the top 9.2% of the class, with weighted averages that range from 93.2 to 97.9 for those 2 years. Will those being inducted in the Cum Laude Society please come forward when I call your name? Christopher Stephen Browner. Michelle Jae-hung Chang. Siyao Kathy Chen. Connie Chung. Eliza Ann Sarnioki Davis. Benjamin Malloy Garfinkel. Ina Kosova. Kanoko Kataka. Christina Ruggiero Morgan. Mai Tang Gwen. Sarah Kate Nyquist. Alexander Jameson Reef. Julian Patrick Senna. Kristen Lillian Shaker. Tui Ha Wen Trun. Tae-young Woo.
I think we should recognize this group. Extraordinary achievement in every way, so congratulations. Well done. Well done. Well done. We will meet in the fountain in the choral room. We'll meet in the choral room afterwards, okay? Many thanks for your attention, and we are adjourned. Have a great day, and many thanks.